Hi, my name is Kaya, and the last words my mother said to me before blocking my number were, "You're bad luck. We can't afford your energy right now." It was raining the day I got the eviction notice. I'd been behind on rent for 2 months after my contract work dried up and the little savings I had disappeared into groceries, car payments, and trying to keep the lights on. My landlord taped the notice right to the peeling door of my studio apartment. Bright pink, bold font, cold as stone. I remember standing there, still in my sleep shirt, barefoot, rain dripping off my hair, holding that piece of paper with hands that had gone numb. It felt less like an eviction and more like a final shove off a cliff I'd been clinging to for months. I didn't panic right away. I called my family first. I shouldn't have. I grew up in a household where struggle wasn't seen as something to help with. It was seen as a stain. Asking for help was weakness, and being weak meant being inconvenient. But I called anyway because I was desperate, because I thought maybe this time would be different. I started with my mother. She answered on speakerphone, which meant everyone could hear. My sister, my uncle, probably even the dog panting in the background. "Mom," I said quietly, I I got an eviction notice. I've been trying to catch up, but I just need a few hundred to." She cut me off. "Kaya, we're all dealing with a lot right now. You know the energy you bring when things go wrong." I paused. "What do you mean, the energy I bring?" My sister chimed in from the background. "You've always been intense, draining, things fall apart around you." I blinked. "Are you serious?" I asked. "I'm not bringing anything, I'm drowning. I thought maybe you could just—" "Kaya," my mom said sharply, "you're bad luck. Honestly, we just can't afford that energy in the house right now." My breath caught. She continued like she was talking about the weather. "You need to figure your life out, alone. We've all made sacrifices. This is yours." Then came the final blow. "We'll come by for the dog later. He'll be better off here." I froze. "No," I said instantly. "No, he's mine." But they came anyway. My sister showed up that night, didn't come in, didn't hug me. Just knocked, stepped over a puddle and said flatly, "Give him to me." I'm not arguing. I handed him over, not because I wanted to, but because I had nowhere to take him. And I didn't want him to sleep in a car, not the way I would, soon. He whimpered when she walked him away. He looked back at me twice. I stood in the doorway until I couldn't see them anymore. Until he was gone. The next day, my family blocked me. Group chat, phone calls, social media, gone. Just like that. They didn't ask where I'd sleep, didn't ask if I had food, didn't even ask if I was safe. It was like I had been cut from their story completely. Like the moment I lost stability, I lost my worth in their eyes too. I spent that night in my car, parked behind a grocery store, wrapping myself in an old sweatshirt and telling myself, this is temporary, just temporary. But somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, they never planned to help. They were just waiting for a reason to let you go. And that was the night everything changed. Not because they abandoned me, but because I realized I had no one left to count on, but me. And one day when they came knocking, they'd finally understand what it felt like, to be turned away. But I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't cry. I would do what they did. Close the door and never look back. I used to think the worst part of being abandoned was the moment it happened. But it wasn't. The worst part came after. The days that followed, when time slowed down and stretched into an endless, aching blur. When silence was louder than shouting. When you woke up and realized there was no one left to text. No one who'd even notice if you were gone. I rotated between sleeping in my car and crashing in the 24-hour laundromat 2 blocks over. The owners pretended not to see me if I kept quiet and didn't take up too much space. I learned how to wash my hair in a sink, how to make a $3 meal last 2 days, how to cry without making a sound. I sent out resumes, dozens. Most went unanswered. I walked into stores asking for work, cashier, stalker, cleaner, anything. I was either overqualified or not the right fit. One manager looked me up and down, saw my wrinkled clothes, and said, "We're not hiring. Maybe try the shelter downtown." I thanked him anyway. I was hungry almost every day, but it wasn't the hunger that hurt. It was the loneliness, the feeling that I could vanish and the world wouldn't blink. And every night I thought of him. My dog, the way he used to sleep curled against my legs, how his ears perked up when I said his name. I imagined him in their house now, fed, warm, safe. I wanted to hate them for taking him, but deep down, I just hoped they were loving him the way I would have, if I'd had the chance. One night, I sat behind a closed fast food place, eating a few cold fries a worker had thrown out in a paper bag. I scrolled through old photos on my cracked phone, pictures of me smiling with people who no longer answered my calls, photos of my mom hugging me on my graduation day, my sister and I dressed up for a wedding, and then I came across a video, me and my dog, playing in the park. He barked, jumped up, and licked the camera. I watched it 5 times. Then I shut the phone off to conserve battery and let the night swallow me. The next morning, something changed. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple. Quiet. I walked into a community center downtown, just needing somewhere to sit, to not feel invisible. And that's when I saw it, a bulletin board full of flyers. One in particular caught my eye. Volunteers needed, housing nonprofit, administrative help, training included. It didn't pay, but it was something. I wrote the number down, called that afternoon from a borrowed phone. A woman named Erica answered. Her voice was kind in a way I hadn't heard in months. I told her I didn't have experience, but I was reliable. I didn't tell her I was homeless. I didn't tell her my family disowned me. I just said, I need a place to start. She said, come in Monday. And I did. I showed up early, wore the cleanest clothes I had, tied my hair back, and sat through a volunteer orientation like it was a Fortune 500 job interview. The work was small at first, filing, entering data, organizing paperwork for housing applications, but it gave me something I hadn't had in weeks, a reason to be somewhere, a reason to be seen. I stayed late, asked questions, listened hard. Erica started trusting me with more responsibilities. After a month, she asked if I wanted to apply for a stipend-based intern position. I said yes without hesitation. It was only $500 a month, but to me, it was everything. It meant I could eat without shame. I could look people in the eye again. I could begin to believe, just a little, that I hadn't been discarded for good. And though I was still sleeping in my car, I had hope now. I had purpose. I wasn't just surviving. I was starting to build, quietly, slowly, without anyone's help. But one step at a time, I was becoming the person they never imagined I could be. They say healing isn't linear. That's true. Some days I woke up with fire in my chest, ready to work, ready to rebuild. Other days, I sat in the staff bathroom at the nonprofit, staring at the mirror, wondering if all I was doing was pretending to be someone who belonged. But I kept showing up. I worked 5, sometimes 6 days a week, filing housing applications, learning the system, watching Erica manage cases like a surgeon. I asked questions, took notes, stayed late, learned how public assistance worked, how housing placements were determined, what qualified someone for emergency support and what didn't. And slowly, I became reliable. After 3 months, Erica handed me my first full-time client file. Think you're ready? She asked with a half smile. I nodded. Because I was. Maybe I hadn't known where I belonged before. But this place, these people, they treated me like I mattered. Not because of what I had, but because of what I gave. I moved out of my car after 5 months. A coworker who'd heard me mention I was between places offered a spare room in her apartment. I paid rent, small, shared space, nothing fancy, but it had a bed, a lamp, a door I could close. It felt like luxury. I still had no word from my family. I stopped expecting one. The day my sister posted a photo of my dog on Instagram, him in a birthday hat surrounded by her friends and balloons, I stared at it for a long time. He looked healthy. His eyes still had that gleam, but not once. Not once. Did she message me? No update. No, he misses you. Just a caption. Our favorite boy turns 5. Our. As if I had never existed. I wanted to comment, to scream, to remind her whose lap he used to curl into every night when the world felt too loud. But I didn't. I closed the app. I'd promised myself that my pain wouldn't become my anchor. Instead, I buried it deep. Not to forget, but to function. Because every time I helped a client find a shelter bed before sunset or filled out emergency assistance forms for a mother with 2 kids and nowhere to go, I remembered exactly how it felt to be the one nobody cared about. My pain made me better at my job, more patient, less judgmental, fiercely protective. Eventually, I earned a promotion, case coordination specialist. It wasn't a flashy title, but to me, it was proof that I was building something, and with it came access. I started working alongside government departments, learned the deeper bureaucracy, helped design processes that sped up response times for applicants who were on the brink of homelessness. One day, Erica pulled me aside. "You know," she said, "when you first walked in here, I thought you were just another volunteer passing through." I smiled. "I thought I was too." She nodded slowly. "You ever think of staying long term, moving up?" I nodded. "Every day." And that's when I made the choice. I wasn't just going to survive the system. I was going to change it. I went back to school part-time, online courses in nonprofit management and public housing policy, got certifications, joined panels, met with city leaders, earned a name for myself not just as a hard worker, but as someone who understood the problem because she'd lived it. I never posted updates, never made speeches about my journey, but I kept a journal, and at the top of one page I wrote, "The people who left you will never recognize the version of you that healed without them." I looked at that sentence every time I doubted myself, every time I heard my mother's voice echoing in my head, "You bring bad energy." What I brought was fire, and that fire was turning into something they couldn't ignore forever. By the time I was promoted to housing program manager, it had been nearly 5 years since I last heard my family's voices. 5 years since my mother called me bad luck. Since my sister took my dog and never looked back. Since I sat in a car clutching a paper bag of cold fries, wondering if I would ever matter to anyone again. I didn't just survive those years. I transformed. I led initiatives that got people off the streets before winter. I secured funding that helped single parents find stable housing in neighborhoods where their kids could walk to school. I taught interns who reminded me of myself, nervous, uncertain, still learning to trust their own voice. And through it all, my family remained silent. No calls, no texts, no, "How are you?" No, "We saw your name in the paper." Not even a whisper. Part of me wondered if they knew, if they'd heard somehow that the daughter they'd cast off had built something solid, something powerful. But I didn't need their applause anymore. I stopped needing it a long time ago. And yet one thing still hurt. I never got my dog back. Every few months my sister would post a photo, him wearing a raincoat, curled up on a couch, licking ice cream from a spoon. I never liked or commented. I just watched, because even though I was building a new life, that piece of me still felt stolen, until something strange happened. I was sitting at my desk, sipping coffee, reviewing a stack of emergency housing applications. It was a slow Friday afternoon, the kind where you clear out the backlog and prep for next week's storm. And then I saw it, a manila folder slightly creased at the corners. Name scrawled across the top. I read it once. Then again, application. Name Lisa Thomas, relation to head of household. Spouse co-applicant Richard Thomas. My mother, my stepfather. I flipped the page and saw the full story. Evicted, savings depleted, medical debt piling up, requesting emergency housing assistance. I sat still for a long time, just staring at those names, the ones that used to appear on my report cards, on my birthday cards. Now they were showing up on an application for help. In my department. There was a sticky note attached from the intake coordinator. They requested urgent review, claimed they used to work in the system and know how to pull strings, said the director might know them. I let out a soft, disbelieving laugh. They were using my name as leverage, without knowing it would land on my desk. Poetic. There was a small photo attached, probably submitted by mistake. My mother looking thinner than I remembered. My stepfather tired-eyed, and there, nestled between them on the couch. My dog, older, grayer, but still him. A lump rose in my throat. They didn't know they were looking directly into the eyes of the person they discarded. They didn't know I held the stamp now, the authority, the gate, the power they once denied me. I flipped through the rest of the packet. Everything filled out correctly. Financial hardship verified. Technically, they qualified, but there was one section they'd miscalculated. Past incidents involving false documentation, property disputes, or abuse of family ties. I remembered every text, every voicemail, the silence, the disappearance, and I remembered what they'd done to me when I was just trying to survive. They took what little I had, then labeled me the problem, then walked away. I stared at the line that read, "We have no other family to turn to." Number, of course, they didn't. They made sure of that. And now they were sitting in the waiting room, unaware of who held their fate in her hands. Me, the daughter they called bad luck, the girl they erased, the woman they now had to hope would save them. I placed the file down, took a slow breath. I had a decision to make, not out of vengeance, but out of truth. And this time, I would not shrink. I would not forget. I would not forgive what they never even acknowledged. I stared at the file for what felt like an hour, but my hands never moved. Not to stamp, not to sign, just to hold it, like it might vanish if I let go. The truth was, I could feel every version of myself bleeding through the pages. The version of me who begged them for help and was told, "Stay away." The one who handed over her dog because she had nowhere to sleep. The girl they blocked, erased, and now their names were sitting in front of me, desperate, vulnerable, clinging to whatever string they thought still existed between us. I flipped to the final page. There it was, the section titled Emergency Justification, a handwritten note from my mother. "We're going through a hard time. My husband lost his job and I'm recovering from surgery. We've applied for state assistance and are looking for stability. We just need one break." One break. That sentence rang in my ears because I had begged for one break. One mattress on a floor, one meal, one hug that didn't come with judgment or strings. They gave me nothing, and now? They wanted grace from a system they once told me I was foolish for working in. They had spent years whispering that I'd never make it, that I was too emotional, too sensitive, too weak to handle real pressure. And now that I was the system, they expected mercy? A knock came on my office door, my assistant gently peeking in. "Hey, the Thomas case. Their application's due for review today. You want me to submit it into the queue?" I hesitated, then said, "No. Leave it here. I'll finish it myself." She nodded and closed the door behind her. I leaned back, exhaled slowly, and looked at the optional comment section, the one that rarely got filled in. The section labeled Additional Remarks from Case Manager. My pen hovered above it, and then I wrote, "Applicant previously severed all ties with available family support systems through emotional and psychological neglect. No documented attempt has been made to reconcile or acknowledge this history. Recommendation: denial under Clause 2.7, emotional misconduct resulting in the displacement of vulnerable dependents." I looked at my words, not angry, just honest. Then I picked up the red stamp, held it in my hand, pressed it down, denied. The sound echoed in my office like a gavel. But it wasn't revenge. It was closure. Not petty, not cruel, just final. I clipped the folder shut and placed it in the outgoing tray. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just sat there, steady, breathing in the quiet that came after you finally stop waiting to be seen by the people who chose not to see you. A few hours later, I passed through the lobby on my way out for lunch, and there they were, sitting in the waiting area. My mother scrolling on her phone, my stepfather arguing with a receptionist. She looked older, worn, tired in a way I recognized from my own reflection 5 years ago. Our eyes met, briefly. Something flickered across her face. Recognition? Regret? I'll never know, because I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I didn't nod. I just walked out the doors they once closed on me. But not before hearing my stepfather say, "Are you sure she's the director?" "She looks familiar." I smiled, just barely, because yes, she was familiar. She was the girl you left behind, and now, she's the woman who got back up, and doesn't need to explain herself to you ever again. After that day in the lobby, I waited, not out of uncertainty, but out of curiosity. I wanted to know if they'd try, if they'd appeal the denial, if they'd write me a letter or send a message, anything. But just like 5 years ago, they disappeared the moment things didn't go their way. There was no email, no voicemail, no acknowledgement. The file sat closed in our archives, marked Application Denied, Clause 2.7, and with it, any remaining fantasy that they might change. The most telling part? They didn't even ask why. They didn't fight for a second chance. They didn't protest. They just moved on. Like I was never there, just like before. But I didn't feel abandoned anymore. I felt confirmed. Because that day, I had offered them something they never gave me: a review, a moment of honesty, a decision made with clarity, not cruelty. And I knew I made the right call. Still, that night, I sat on the edge of my bed with my phone in hand. I didn't scroll. I didn't call anyone. I just stared at the lock screen, my dog's old photo still set as the background, even after all these years. He looked so young in the photo, ears flopping as he ran toward me in the park. I could still remember how he smelled, how he sighed in his sleep, how he used to press his forehead against mine when I cried. They took him because they knew he was my heart. And they never gave him back, not even when they had the chance. I never stopped hoping. But by now, I knew he was gone. Maybe not in body, but in bond. They broke it, but they didn't break me. The next morning, I walked into my office early like I always did. The city's skyline was turning gold with sunrise, and the silence of the building felt sacred. I brewed coffee, unlocked my drawer, and pulled out the envelope I'd kept all this time. One I'd never opened. It was the last birthday card they sent me. The year everything fell apart. I finally opened it. Inside was a generic card that read, "Hope this year brings clarity." No signature, no message, not even my name. It was so fitting, I almost laughed. That was the last time they reached out. Even then, they didn't use their words, so I used mine. That afternoon, I typed up a letter. Not to mail, not to send, just to write. "Dear Mom, you once said I was bad luck, but I was never bad luck. I was just inconvenient. I was the reminder that love comes with responsibility, that family doesn't mean silence, that pain can't be ignored just because it doesn't fit your picture. I was the one who needed you, and you chose your comfort instead. But don't worry, I chose myself. I gave myself the dignity you denied me, and I gave you the mercy of honesty. I'm not writing this for revenge. I'm writing it so you know. I didn't get lucky." I got up, I folded the letter, slipped it into a drawer, let it sit there beside the denial form. 2 truths, 2 endings, and a future where neither of them had power over me anymore. Later that week, a coworker walked into my office holding a new intake folder. Emergency application, no documentation, no ID, but someone vouched for her. Homeless. Name's Emily, been living on buses. I opened the folder and stared at the intake photo. Young, eyes sunken, holding a small dog to her chest, even thinner than she was. But the way she held him? Tight, like the whole world could leave and she'd still have that love. "I'll take it," I said quietly. "I'll handle it personally." Because I knew what it meant to be left behind. And now that I was on the other side, I wasn't going to forget. I was never bad luck. I was the break no one gave me. And now, I give it to others. Some people spend their lives trying to get back what was taken from them. I didn't. I built something new instead. Over the next year, our department expanded. I was promoted again, Director of Housing Access and Advocacy. It wasn't just a title. It was everything I never thought I'd have: authority, trust, and the ability to change real lives with a single signature. I worked with city leaders, negotiated shelter funding, helped create transitional housing programs that prioritize dignity, not just survival. My team called me a force. I laughed when I heard that. A force. The same girl who once cried herself to sleep in a laundromat now had a team of 10 reporting to her. But I never told them the whole story. Not about the car, not about the fries behind the fast food joint, not about the dog. That part stayed mine. Until one day, I met someone who understood without asking. Her name was Maya, a social worker from another agency. She had eyes that knew too much and a voice that carried warmth even when she was tired. We crossed paths during a multi-agency outreach. She was sharp, decisive, funny in the driest way. The first time we had coffee, I told her I used to live in my car. She didn't flinch. She said, "Wait, me too. Minivan. Passenger seat didn't recline all the way." And just like that, something shifted. Over the months, we grew close, quietly, steadily. She never asked me for the story I didn't want to tell. But one night, over takeout on my couch, I showed her a photo of my dog. She reached out, thumb gently brushing the image. "He looks like he adored you." "He did," I said, "until they took him." And for the first time, I let someone hold that truth with me. Not fix it, just hold it. That night, I didn't cry. I felt peace, because there's something powerful in sharing your story with someone who doesn't use it against you. I kept moving forward. I bought my first condo, a modest two-bedroom with sunlight in the morning and a view of a small park. Every corner of it felt like defiance. Every drawer I filled was proof that I could take up space now. One afternoon, I got a call from the shelter partner we worked with. "Kaya, someone dropped off a dog, said he's old and needs a quiet place. Doesn't do well in shelters. We were going to send him to foster. But then I saw the name, thought maybe you should know." I froze. Then I whispered, "What name?" There was a pause. "His collar says, Lucky." I drove there like the world was on fire, and when I stepped through those doors, my breath caught. It was him. Older, thinner, but his tail still thumped when he saw me. His eyes lit up. He limped over, age had slowed him, but I knelt and opened my arms anyway. He pressed his head against mine, just like he used to. And that moment, that was everything they had taken, returned to me, not by their hands, but by fate. I filled out the adoption form. The shelter manager asked, "Want to list an emergency contact?" I smiled, number he's never leaving again. That night, he curled up beside me just like before. I cried quietly into his fur, not because I was broken, but because I wasn't. Because after everything, after every door slammed in my face, every silence, every cold shoulder, every name I was called, I had made it, without them, without their love, without their permission, without their seat at the table. And now, they would never have a key to the life they once threw me out of. Some stories don't end with confrontation. They end with understanding, quiet, certain, and complete. Mine ended the day I opened my mailbox and found a letter from the City Archive Division. Nothing urgent, just a routine update. A file I'd once handled was being formally closed due to inactivity. The applicant's name? Lisa Thomas, my mother. Their housing request had expired. They never reapplied. No appeal, no call, no attempt to reach me, not even a whisper. They vanished the same way they left me, without explanation, without remorse, without looking back. But I didn't feel abandoned. I felt released. I placed the letter on my desk, turned it over once, then slid it into a folder labeled Closed. Not just for them, but for me. That red denial stamp I had once pressed down with shaking fingers, it had done more than reject an application. It had sealed the final chapter of a story I spent too many years stuck inside. They wrote me off, and I rewrote myself. I moved through the weeks ahead with clarity. My work grew deeper, more meaningful. I wasn't just placing people in housing, I was helping them reclaim their lives, their worth, their voice. One woman, Maria, came in clutching her baby and a garbage bag full of clothes. Her ex had taken everything. She didn't cry, she didn't beg. She just looked at me and said, "I just need someone to treat me like I matter." And I did, because I knew. Every time someone sat across from my desk and whispered, "I don't think I belong anywhere," I remembered being them, and I reminded them what I had once needed to hear. You are not your worst moment. You are not what they left behind. You are still whole. And slowly, they believed it. One client left me a thank you note that read, "You didn't just give me housing, you gave me back my dignity." I kept it in my drawer, next to the unopened birthday card my mother sent years ago, the one with no message inside. 2 pieces of paper, 2 versions of love, one empty, one earned. I chose the second every time. One morning I walked Lucky through the neighborhood park. He was slower now, stiff in the joints, white in the muzzle. But every time I said his name, he still turned with those same warm eyes. We passed a woman on a bench holding a clipboard, nervously flipping through pages. She caught my eye. You work in housing, right? She asked. I nodded. Director of Housing Access. She exhaled like she'd just been handed oxygen. I applied for a unit downtown. I didn't know if I should even bother following up. I smiled. Follow up, always. You never know who's on the other end. She glanced down at her paperwork. They said someone else stamped it already. Denied. My smile faded. I knelt beside her and gently took the form, scanned it, reviewed it. It wasn't my stamp. I looked back up at her. Let me see what I can do. Because I knew what it felt like to be denied, but I also knew what it meant to be seen. I made a few calls, pushed a few doors, and by the end of the week, she had a key in her hand. She cried when I handed it to her, and I walked away knowing that no part of me belonged to the past anymore. Not my pain, not my shame, not even my memory of who I was when they turned away. Because I had taken it all and turned it into something that saved people, not just them, me. The finality didn't come with fireworks or revenge. It came with peace, with a dog at my side, a key in my hand, and a life no one could take away. They blocked me, took my dog, left me with nothing, and I gave them back exactly what they gave me. Silence. But in that silence, I found everything. A name they erased, stamped on every door I now open for others, and one they'll never pass through again.